the details. Professor Niladri Sekhar Das, an erudite scholar, has published books and research articles in interdisciplinary areas of linguistics and allied areas. He specializes in corpus linguistics and language technology, lexicography, especially on computational lexicography, language documentation and digitization, digital humanities, which is the talk of the town now, and digital ethnography, as well as translation, and not to forget his own mother tongue, Bangla. He specializes in Bangla language and linguistics. He has been a visiting fellow in many academic institutions in India and abroad. To mention a couple, he's been a visiting fellow in the Language and Brain Lab at the University of Oxford, UK in 2019, Center for Literacy and Multilingualism at the University of Reading, UK in 2019. He was and he is a research advisor to many industries as well as academia, which includes Zycorp, which is in Canada, Mobile Labs Sweden, Cognizant India, Rave Systems Limited Dhaka, as well as in academic institutions like University of Ontario, Canada, Department of Linguistics, Syracuse University, USA. He has delivered close to 100 lectures in India and abroad, and he's here with us today. He has received the British Visiting Fellowship in 2018. During this visit, he contributed to the development of clinical tools that can aid in the assessment of and interventions for speech language impaired population, which is a very important contribution. And at Indian Statistical Institute, Kolkata, he has carried out almost 18 major research projects which are funded by different ministries of the Government of India, including MHRD and Ministry of Communications and IT. He has been a very close friend of mine since the early 90s, and we've been working together for almost 2 decades. For more details about him, I would like everyone to visit his Google site. You can Google for Niladri Sekhar Das. It'll take you to that. And finally, to say it in his words, I'm quoting whatever Niladri regularly says. I'm a servant of linguistics who has committed his life in the service of languages and people. Niladri Sekhar Das, welcome to Tamil Moliyal Changam. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I can start now.
Thank you, Professor Armuri, for your very detailed introduction to our guest and speaker today. Sir, we are very eagerly waiting here to listen to your lecture. Please, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you everybody for giving me this opportunity in such a erudite scholarly gathering to share some of my ideas, some of the concepts or the experiences I have gathered in last, say, 22 years of work in this area. So before I actually probe into the domain of my talk, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to the members of this group one by one. As far as I know, I may miss somebody, please pardon me. So my regards and thanks to Professor K. Karunakaran, the President of Tamil Linguistic Association, Professor G. Balasubramanian, Secretary of this association, and Professor G. Ravi Shankar from PILC and also from Tamil Linguistic Association. I also express my sincere thanks to Professor Lalita Raja of the Annamala University, my close friend S. Arul Modi, Dr. S. Arul Modi from CALS, Hyderabad, and my colleague, Dr. A.L.R. Prem Kumar from CIL, Mysore. And also, in this great opportunity, I would like to express my respect, unbound respect and gratitude to those great scholars of Tamil Nadu to whom I have been indebted for decades. So please permit me to express my sincere gratitude and pranam to Professor N. Daivasundaram. I consider him my mentor and inspirator. Professor Sanmugam from Bharatiya University, Professor L. Ramamurthy from CL Mysore, Professor S. Rajendran from Tamil University, and now in Amritapitam, Dr. M. Subramaniam from Bharatiya University, Dr. N. Ramesh from Bharatiya, Dr. Shankar Ganesh from Bharatiya, Professor Umarani Pappusamy from CL Mysore, Dr. V. Vijaya from Annamala University, Dr. Chandramohan from Annamala University, and many others, Professor Dr. Muralidharan and many others whom I have missed. So this is a great opportunity for me to express my sincere thanks, and perhaps I have been collaborating with various my friends and colleagues across the country and a major part with Tamil Nadu. So this is an opportunity I took to express my sincere gratitude. And once again, I express my sincere thanks, particularly to Ravi Shankar ji, because he invited me and I gladly accepted, because I thought that this is one of the platforms where I can get another good opportunity to learn from the masters of the craft, because I know several great Tamil scholars who are attending this lecture, and I am expecting that they should give me some good feedback based on which I can improve myself. So keeping in those formalities, let me come back directly to the talk today. As you can look at the title of the talk, Language Corpus Generation, Processing, Utilization, Linguistics, and Language Technology. So I assume that most of the participants who are joining in this discussion they know linguistics, they know languages, they know the various aspects of language and linguistics. But if you look at the title, it is quite loaded with some terms, quite advanced terms like corpus, text processing, text utilizations, and all those things. So I have kept these things in a very preliminary stage, keeping in mind that we are going to have some exposure to the domain and how we can enrich ourselves with a new area of study, and how this method can help us to produce some relevant documents or resources for the development of our languages. So here I go. So first thing here, it says, what is a corpus? That is the first thing, the first term. So many of us are not actually well known with the concept that what does it actually mean. So I have tried some definitions, which are basically, you can find out that there is a graded definitions. First one is a naive one, or a naive definition. Second one is a very mostly simplified one. Third one is highly technical, and fourth one is ideal. As we know all that, ideal is never happens. So more or less we will be happy with the first three definitions, like naive definition or simple definition or technical definition. We as a corpus linguist actually emphasize on all those three, because the basic technical definition purely says how a corpus should be developed. So I am not going to read out those lines one by one. As you can already read and think, that you can find out that certain components, certain aspects of the language are being considered seriously and put into the digitization format. So the basic issue here is for us that the data which we are trying to procure and utilize for our purposes has to be invariably in digital format. So keeping these things in mind, we have defined the title of corpus. Now, once this is done, now the second one, it says that what it is, language data. So you can notice here that I have tried to understand that, okay, fine, if you definition, give you the definition, but exactly what does it mean for us, for a layman, for a common person who is not much expert in this area of expertise in this area of technology aspects. So he or she might be interested to know that what we actually mean by this. So here it can say that I have identified certain features which you can refer to, that it includes samples of language data. I have already mentioned. It should be digitized form. electronic person, and it should be open for all kinds of processing. You can customize the data or the information which is available from the text for your own purposes. The whole thing basically usage based. All the data, all the examples are usage based. It represents a language or a particular variety or a sub-variety, whatever it may be. It should be properly representative. I'll go into these features in far more details. It is a good database for doing any kind of trial, for testing and trial of the systems and tools, good for experiments and good for developing resources. So these are the very important component for a corpus. Now, why do we need a corpus? So now we have understood that what corpus actually constitute and what are the basic features. Now, why do we need to have this kind of corpus for our purposes? It's a very simple question. Everybody would like to ask, okay, fine, you are insisting that we should have a corpus, but why should I do this? What should I do with that? Why it is needed? Now, I have tried to identify 10 basic reasons, justifications, why we should go for it. The first one is enough of intuitive assumptions. If you look at the history of language study, all theoretical models or all experimental models rarely have depended on empirical data. So most of the time it is been intuitive assumptions. So we have understood, because there are certain definite reasons. I am not going into details of those reasons, how the masters has claimed that perhaps the all-time intuitive assumptions may not help us to understand language in a proper way. We need to have some empirical data. Enough of generative generalizations. As you know that I won't go into details. This is a long debatable area whether we should be generative or empirical. As you know that we are empiricists are strongly fighting with those generative people, and generative people are trying to nullify the importance of those empirical data. So this has been a continuous conflict. I won't go into the details, but those who are belonging to the domains of linguistics, they know that this kind of conflict is going on for generations. Lack of actual empirical data. We have noted that for a long time, there has been scarcity of empirical data to study the language. Corpus gives that opportunity for us. Approach towards database investigation. That's a new approach to study in the area of the big data. This has been a very tremendous pool for us. New perspective towards language description. Using new empirical data examples and instances, we acquire new perspectives in language description, new application possibilities in various domains. We never thought that language data would be used in your apps. We never thought that language data would be used in e-governance. We never thought that language data would be used by a system like Alexa, who would be using natural language data to respond to queries. So you can imagine that multiple different domains are regularly coming up to address many new requirements. And here Corpus fulfills all these requirements. Application possibilities and huge translation market. I don't think that I need to explore this much, as you all know that the amount of data regularly being generated and those are going to be marketed or translated into different languages is a huge. Birth of AI and language technology has invariably asked for large amount of digital data, and Corpus provides that. Gap between expectation and reality. So this is a very important crucial point, what we expected from the language study and we got, and what is the reality is there. As you know, that many studies in the early 60s and 70s could show, with reference to the British National Corpus or Brown Corpus, that what has been stated in grammar books, what has been we have been teaching to the learners, and what has been actually noted in the reality of life and reality of languages are not two same thing. They have a lot of differences. And these differences are actually being challenged now, and with new evidence of data collected in corpus. Linguistics is not syntax only, as you can clearly understand, that almost all the people who steal the limelight nowadays, or for last 30 years, we have noted, it is the only syntax people. They have tried to look at that everything of language is actually of no importance until and unless you leave little bit of syntax. These are you fight with syntax. So I would like to come out from that frame and look at the language from the perspective which has been never done before. So So I found 10 reasons. And this slide is actually open for all scholars to think of it. How you can utilize corpus in other activities also. Now, here is an example of raw corpus. I've taken it. You can very well recognize the temple. And here is an example I have taken from the tourism department of Tamil Nadu government. You can see that it says it has a text. So the corpus you can get from the web platforms or from other sources. What you get, not that what the text is talking about. I'm talking in a very abstract level. See that I have got a text where there is an image and there is a text. Both are there available in digital platform. And most of the time, these texts are basically encoded by HTML or HGML or different kinds of encoding techniques. So this is a data which is actually available on digital platform. So now I have to convert it into machine readable form in such a way that I can utilize the text. I have to remove the image from my database and preserve the text for all kinds of linguistic activities that I will do. So I'll show here. So this is the page up. You can see here that original text here. And now I have using a tool, I can break it into sentences. So here, what you can find out that whole text, two important changes have taken place. First, the image is removed, and the whole text, the paragraph, is broken into valid sentences, acceptable, grammatically acceptable English sentences. I'm giving you an English example. You can also take, actually, I would rather emphasize on you that you take the text from your mother tongue, because you have to serve your mother tongue and nobody else. So here, I have broken those sentences into 5 valid sentences, and each sentence has a unique ID value, syntactic ID value is assigned to it. That is tourism domain. TR stands for tourism domain, and sentence number 1, and this is the content. So this kind of file actually preserved in the Excel format. Once this data is generated, that I have got 5 sentences, I put the first stage of processing is called posted. So here, the whole text is posted. I have used that UCRL clause 7 version, like tag set version of C7 class. And if you notice here that each word in the whole text actually are tagged at the parts of speech level. And each parts of speech is absolutely accurately tagged. The parts of speech tagger, which has been developed by Lancaster University Group, where as a Indian language, also they have taken a lot of samples from Indian languages, in Indian scripts and Indian languages. They have also trained for that. I've taken for our understanding for English. So you can find out from this database or from this example how each and every word is tagged at the parts of speech level. So parts of speech level is one of the stages of text annotation or text processing. So this is necessary for many reasons, not only for language technology purposes, also for lexicographic purposes, language description purposes, language teaching purposes. So you can easily visualize, if you are given this set of data, you clearly understand that how this resource, very powerful, highly processed, systematized data, can be utilized for your own purposes. Like you can utilize this data for language teaching purposes, teaching grammars, parts of speech to the learners. You can utilize this data for developing a good dictionary for your language, or you can utilize also identifying the nature of parts of speech which is being used naturally in your language. So there are multiple purposes. Now here, yes. So page up here. Now the basic game plan is something like this. That our basic game plan is that there is a language in action. Language in action, what I mean actually, language being used in our day-to-day life in various aspects, various domains of our existence. So broadly, as you know, traditional linguist or any linguist knows that it has 2 different parts. One is speech part and corpus, text part. And both of them contributes to develop a corpus in digital platform. Once this corpus is developed, processed, annotated, or customized for various purposes, broadly we can think of, you can utilize it for language technology purposes, linguistics purposes, various social sciences purposes, translation purposes, and many other domains where you think you can utilize them. So this is the basic game plan for us. Now, I go back to the history that when did it start and how did it grow? So the first area, the first time when the computer was utilized to develop the corpus is basically 1961, exactly 1961, when Charles Francis and Henry Kuchera first developed the Brown corpus at Brown University using some statistical model to develop the corpus. And their basic goal was simple, that let us see if the language which we are teaching in schools, in colleges, in universities, if this is actually attested in our regular day-to-day use of the language. And see if the things, the rules, the models, the theories which has been described in dictionary, sorry, in grammars, language teaching grammars, are at all represented or attested in actual empirical data or not. So that was the basic goal in 1961 when Nelson Francis and Henry Kuchera first developed this corpus. And after compiling this data, to their utter surprise, they noted that what they have been teaching in grammars are different from what is being represented in the data. And reversely, what is found in the data are hardly represented in grammar books. So they made a strong challenge to the to the intuitive and generative model of language study, and claiming that we should better convert our attention to the actual empirical language data, and that can give us a better understanding of our language. And this actually inspired scholars across globe, across Atlantic, across Pacific, and across all oceans, or many countries, to compile databases. So from 1961, the curve is continuously growing up. Now, we are perhaps in a position to tell that there is not a single so-called standard language under the sun is left where there is no corpus. And every language now revising their existing theories, models, systems, and understandings based on new data they procure, they gather, they analyze, they process in the corpus database. So this has been the first stage when this started. Now, yes, just a minute, please. Yes, growth of the. Now I should come to the 10 main features of corpus data. So this is the first situation. Then here I go the main 10 features of corpus data one by one. Very briefly, first feature is quantity of language data that big in size, contains a large amount of speech and text data. The basic feature of a corpus when you try to develop, you have to keep in mind that the quantity of data should be very rich. You could look at the data here that continuously is growing. In 2001, you can find out that 1 million data is no more a choice. 10 million data is no more a choice. It is in the order of 100 millions. Because of the new advanced technology, because of the new availability of data on digital platform, because of the many text processing, easy text processing, downloadable tools and systems. So gathering large amount of data is no more a challenge for us. We can get data, and that too, Unicode compatible data for using for various purposes. In this platform, perhaps I can refer to you an interesting study which I have recently conducted, and we did it completely successfully, that we have developed the first Indian newspaper corpus. And this has been completed last year for Bangla in our institute. We have taken one of the versions of the Indian newspapers, and within 1 month of time, we have developed 100 million corpus of Indian newspaper English. And that has been entirely normalized, processed, and posted following the Stanford post standard. That is a tremendous achievement, which can be utilized with the first time that Indian newspaper English being properly digitized, processed, annotated, and made available for research and development purposes. Feature number 2, quality of language data. A text sample should be obtained from genuine normal speech of speech and writing. So second feature says that you should like have a language corpus, genuine empirical speech text, and genuine empirical written text data. That is constitute the not a artificial one. Third one, representation of text types. A corpus should include text samples from a broad range of domains. These are, if you take those symbols, these are actually represent different pockets, different domains of a society, of a speech community, where languages are being used in different ways. So we should have wide representations of samples from various domains, so that it is properly balanced, widely representative, and the true replica of language being used. As you know that there are 1001 domains of language used, both in spoken and written form, and it is possible that you can include as much possible, as much allowed, or as much capacity you have. Feature number 4, simplicity in text storage. So it implies that a corpus should contain text in simple form and format. This is the primary thing we all the time emphasize, that data should have, you can have annotated version, advanced version, processed version. You can have a lot of metadata. You can do different kinds of coding like HTML, SGML, or rather some other kind of coding. But at the end of the day, keep in mind that raw data in simple format is the best thing that can be utilized by larger number of population. So that should be given maximum importance. Feature 5, equality in text samples. So here, text samples used in a corpus should be of equal size. Normally, we claim, this is an ideal frame, that if you have 4 different types of text data in your corpus, so it should come that it should constitute equal amount of data from all the domains you are considering. But sometimes it is not possible to have this kind of representations because of some various technical constraints. So our logistic constraints. So in this case, a proportional representation will suffice. But the person who is engaged in development of texts, a corpus, should emphasize on it, or think how he should give a frame to the form, to the structure, to the content of the corpus. Retrievability of data of an information, that is a very important issue. Information retrieval, you can notice here that you have a raw text and an annotated text, both. And it should be retrievable in both ways, that both machine and man both can retrieve data for their different purposes. You never know who is going to use this data for what purpose. But you should have the data in such a way, store in such a way that anybody and everybody can utilize, can extract, can utilize or access the database as and when required. Retrieval of data and language and information is may be so feasible that it is easily retrieved data. Then feature verifiability of data and information. That's the most important criteria. Text samples should be open for free and empirical verification. It is not that whatever the text developer or corpus developer claims is accurate. So whatever I claim should be verified openly. That means data should be made available in such a way that each and every person can verify the data. So if I have a corpus, we have both language data and information, and that should be very open for all kinds of verification by machine and man. So if I collect a large amount of data for Bangla or Tamil, and I say that this is the best way of sample data of Tamil news texts, so it is not that what I claim you are going to believe it. So you must have the full access. You see, you analyze, you observe, and you do draw inference to verify that whatever I claim, whatever claim I make, that is also verified by you, and you attest or reject my argument. So it should be open, that kind of verification. Then augmentability of data. This is the point which I have been emphasizing for ages, but neither the government nor the agencies who are involved in these kind of things, they are at all interested or ready to say. I say that a corpus must be augmented with new text data to increase its coverage and stock. That is a necessary thing. This is a very important component. Let me share with you that at present, the American National Corpus or the British National Corpus or Dutch National Corpus or German National Corpus or Swedish Corpus or even Australian Corpus of English, all these corpora are open for regular updation of new data every day. The rule of the British government is something like this, that whatever being published every day, one version of the digital data should be deposited at the British National Archive, where the data should be stored and that should be processed and updated. See, this is so mandatory that no publication house can escape this rule. No digital platform can escape this rule. The data regularly being deposited at that archive so that it can be depository and that can be processed. Unfortunately, we have never been successful enough to develop this attitude for us. Most of the time, the synchronicity is actually missing. Synchronicity is there, but diachronicity of the aspect is missing. So what important criteria that it should be augmented regularly, because you never know how language change over the years. Documentation of information, that is metadata. Detailed information of the text should be kept separately from the text itself for proper documentation. So every data that being collected should be properly documented. Here are the different kinds of information which you can add to the data for your preservation, or you can add some additional information as your metadata in the whole process of documentation. But basic argument is very clear that whatever data you collect, you must have full detailed documentation so that that can be utilized for other purposes also. Last, usability of data and information. A corpus, raw and annotated, should be usable for all kinds of linguistic and extra-linguistic. So whatever data I collect should be either speech corpus, raw and annotated version, or text corpus, both raw and annotated version. Both should be usable by machine and human being. So you should develop your corpus in such a way that this should be accessible or utilizable by whoever who is interested in the database. And as you know that the number of users of this kind of database is actually growing in huge number over the years. Now I would be very brief here about the classifications of language corpus. What are the different kinds of classifications? This is a technical kind, theoretical kind of classifications. Now, what I proposed in 2005 and modified in 2015 and coming to 2021, I find that many of those concepts, the scheme of classifications that I proposed, are actually revised thoroughly, changed. So I give a preliminary idea that how can you classify corpus based on your requirement. First is basically genre of text, that you can have three kinds of corpus. One is the speech corpus, like where you can keep the audio speech samples. Here is an example. Or spoken corpus. Spoken corpus is basically a transcribed version of audio texts, like London spoken corpus, or basically the text corpus, simple written text samples. The Indian TDIL language corpus, that is basically based on the genre. In case of nature of data, you can divide general corpus, special, sample, literary, monitor corpus, sub-language corpus, or different types of classifications you can utilize, or you can add. Each corpus has a different characteristic features based on which we can classify them, primarily based on the nature of data. Then type of text, you can keep text, like in a country like India, you can have monolingual corpus or bilingual corpus or multilingual corpus or polylingual corpus if you like. That ISI Bangla corpus is basically a monolingual corpus, whereas bilingual corpus is ILC Odia Bengali corpus is basically a bilingual corpus, and TDL text corpus is a multilingual corpus. So you can also have, based on the number of languages included into this, any translation, parallel translation corpus can be also considered as bilingual translation corpus or something like that. Now, purpose of design. When you corpus design, there are two versions. One is called unannotated or raw version, where you don't add any additional information into the text. You just keep the raw version of the text as a mother version. Then you do the annotated version, where you can add some extra information, data into this information into the text itself. So it becomes annotation. There are more than 20 different types of text annotations, which I won't discuss into here, but you know that there are. Whenever my next book on text annotation would come maybe in 2001, that deals with 10 major types of text annotation. So this is an annotated version of text, has more utilization or usability and utility in various domains rather than the corpus. The nature of app is how we are going to utilize those corpus in different domains. You can think of nature of exercise, aligned corpus sentences are actually align the word level or the phrase level for translation purposes. Or you can have parallel corpus or two some similar conceptually equivalent sentences can be kept side by side for analysis. You can also have translation corpus from mother language to source language. You can also have a reference corpus for reference purposes if you need, please. Or you can also have a comparable corpus where you can put any two corpora side by side to understand how the whole ideas or concepts or language are actually evolved and developed. So there are multiple nature of applications based on which you can define them. So I have different 5 types. You can definitely add over there. Now, here are the major issues in corpus. This is a very another important aspect you have to keep in mind. So I don't know how much time you are going to give, maybe another half an hour or 15 minutes. Okay. So major issues in corpus generation like size of a corpus, method of data sampling or representative corpus. So there are 12 major issues. I will be very brief on those aspects. So first is size of a corpus. So you can look at the picture that 1 million size to 100 million words. So you can choose any type of these variations on small size or medium size or big size, whatever you require. So size of a corpus is basically varies based on the requirement of a particular study or the goal of the project. Representatives of text types, what kind of text will be represented? It can be various ones. Then it can be wide representation, or you can have a very selective representation, or a random selection of the texts, or a very balanced one, or limited one, or marginal one. So you can have multiple choices what kind of text you are going to represent within the corpus. So you have the full freedom to do that. The question of nativity, this is a very theoretical important question. Whose language are going to be represented here? Only the native speakers' language, or foreign speakers' language, or bilingual speakers, or multilingual speakers, old speakers, new speakers. So there are a lot of issues that would come up seriously, and you have to take into consideration that whose language data you are actually considering to be included into the corpus database which you are going to develop for the purpose. The question, the determination of target images. Also think in mind or keep in mind who are actually target images. So as I have already given the different pictures of hive bees and different ants, insects. So these are the busiest people or busiest elements in the nature. They are all the bees. So you can find out that starting from Langtech people to happy hunters. So you can find a lot of people of different works who can actually be interested in this. So when you compile a corpus, you have to keep in mind the proposed target users, who can be the possible users of the data. Maybe some more people will be interested. That is possible. And that happens actually. But at the same time, you have to be very careful that you have to identify who are actually going to utilize them. This is time span. What is the time span you should consider? So it can be either synchronic database, a particular time, or it can be diachronic. So all the major corpora which are so far available globally for utilization and access are basically diachronic corpora. Although there are even number of very large number of synchronic corpora, but all master major corpora in the world are now diachronic corpora. So you can have data from contemporary data or historical data or any period specific data, maybe 19th century modern text, or Tamil text or old Tamil text. You can go for developing a corpus, or old Tamil corpus. So you have to decide that what kind of time span actually you are going to capture in the corpus database that you are going to develop. The selection of text, that is a very important thing. So I'm talking about, say, text, written text corpus. Then you can have broadly two types, that either you can include the only informative texts, or you can go for imaginative texts. If you go for informative text, then you have to think there are multiple types, starting from legal, media, technical, commerce, science, or medical text too, or many other types you can include in your corpus. Same way, when you are thinking of imaginative text, you can only include the prose texts, and also you can include the poetic text. So there is a choice for you, open for you, that you can select any of the varieties or conditions or criteria that is more relevant for your purpose. I always suggest that whenever you develop a text corpus, please ignore the poetic text, because poetic text has a different nature altogether, different structure, composition, content, and all those things. So you should always go for a poetic text corpus in a separate way. That would give a better advantage to deal with the poetic languages and understand many important crucial issues of poetic text or poetic corpus, which should not be mixed up with the prose text corpus. The method of data sampling, how you are going to sample your data, you can think of in an arbitrary way, you can do that. You can do it a random way, or you can use some statistical models to serve your purposes, or you can do it customized. Actually, what you need, you emphasize only on that, or you can select in a selective manner. So there are multiple options open for you in cases of data sampling. So you have to think different statistical or mathematical models to select the data. Method of data input, you can have 4 or 5 options. That manual data entry, that was the first stage for in any corpus development in any of the languages, was first done by this way. Or you can data from electronic sources. Now it is open for us. Data from email feeds you can take. Data from the home pages, worldwide websites also, and machine reading objects like OCS. So broadly, there are 5 possible ways that I have mentioned here. You can utilize them to access data for your purposes. The softwares, as you know, that technology has come a long way now to serve our purposes, and it's very easy now. You can use computer, hardware, software. So both the things are required, both hardware and like computer, printer, scanner, or storage devices to store your data. And you can use a lot of different softwares now available. NLP toolkits are there, text processing tools there, statistical tools, a lot of different types of softwares, and most of them are freely available now for our purposes. So these can be utilized for your purpose, and you can also add many other softwares as you would require. Then management of corpus data is, there are broadly 7 stages: corpus data storage, metadata annotation, header file preparation, data retrieval, upgradation of data, cataloging of data, and dissemination of data. So there are 7 broad stages based on which you can do the task. And corpus sanitation is on one stage. I won't go into details, but broadly 5 stages like spelling correction, grammar corrections, text normalization, text standardization, and text validation. I won't go into details because there are a lot of issues involved into it. My next paper is going to be published on text normalization, text standardization, which has been accepted for publication. That gives some detailed information how we normally do for Indian language texts. Then last issue of the game is basically issue of copyright. If I put this question to you all, whose language is this? Now, every time we do develop a corpus, everybody says that there is a copyright issue. So the authors who has produced the text says that I am the copyright holder. The developers, the digital text developers, this is no, we are the copyright holders. The financiers, the government of India who has given funding for those projects, or any funding agency who develops this project says that no, it is the copyright belongs to us. And the publisher who has published those books or materials, they said that okay, no, it is actually we are the copyright holders. Or ultimately the language users, because the people's language, it is basically people's language. They are the language users. They are also claiming that copyright. They are the copyright users. I must say honestly here that I have no idea that how a language which is the property of all can become a copyrighted issue for somebody else. Because when they develop a corpus, we are not taking the text as such. We are taking only sentences and putting them in a systematic order, maybe in a different order. And ultimately, we develop a set of lexical databases. And this database is a property for all. So how can this be a property of somebody else as a copyrighted thing? This is not clear to me. I put this issue on the floor, on the auditorium, or the speakers, or to the listeners, audience, to decide on it. Now, what does a corpus look like? This is a very crucial issue for us. My understanding is something like that. We get 4 types of information from a corpus. First thing, we get actual language data of empirical use. That includes a lot of things. More than 30 different types of linguistic data we retrieve. Second, we get information of all kinds. Starting to linguistic, extra linguistic, I have included here. There are more than 20 different types of information we can retrieve from corpus. And also we get a lot of examples, unique examples, unknown examples, and varied kinds of examples. And lastly, the very most important thing for us, we get insights into the linguistics and extra linguistics. The last thing, language as a living ethnobiological entity. That is the most important thing, that we understand language, people, culture, history, heritage, ethnicity, knowledge system, belief system, and that enriches and makes us a noble man, better man, good man. And I personally emphasize on the issue number 4. I'm more interested in these things rather than these things, because those people are more hardcore people, they may be interested. But I love language, culture, history, and heritage, so I'm more interested to understand these things based on those language data. Now, here are 5 important points, then I will sum up. I'm nearly coming to an end. So here we use the data for need corpus for developing language processing tools and techniques. There are the list of tools and techniques so far developed or being developed. I won't go into details, starting from different kinds of processing, annotations, and extraction, all kinds of things. You can refer to that. By the way, let me share with you that these slides are available for everybody. I've already given to Ravi Shankar ji and Arul ji. So those who are interested can take from them and go into details. So since there is a shortage of time, I am going to into details of those issues. Digital language resource generation. This is a very crucial issue, that most of the digital resources, knowledge text or knowledge resources of a community are actually not properly developed in digital platform. Many of the Indian languages, if you take consideration, that we don't have term bank, lexical database, or dictionaries, or encyclopedia, or grammars on digital platforms. So these are the very important lexical resources or linguistic resources that can be developed from the corpus and made available for the people by the government for various purposes. Language technology systems and device development, that is a very, very clear here. As you know, that starting from transliteration systems to many words distribution system to sentiment analysis system, there are many things that actually taken care of because of the data. And as we have clearly understood now, that not a single task of language technology is possible without properly developed corpus. So every IT house who is engaged in these kind of things, they're crying for corpus. Even yesterday, I had a long discussions with Oxford University Press asking for the entire Bangla corpus data that I have developed for their purposes. Then after that, it comes based on translation support systems and development. That is, as you know, that machine translation is the area or talk of the town now. So that needs a lot of corpus data for analysis and developing tools and systems. Then man-machine interface development systems like question answering system, web-based learning system, e-learning system. So these are all coming up, and these are also asking for corpus data for developing those systems, e-learning and e-governance purposes. Then speech technology recently has come up. Speech recognition to decomposition to forensic linguistics. Government is also interested to have huge amount of speech data of different communities, different clubs, different groups, different societies, so that they can develop proper speech recognition systems or solve various forensic linguistic issues, so that ultimately they can develop kind of like, say, speaker's profile, or so that they can identify or pass out various purposes of the government. So speech technology is really coming up very strongly. Unfortunately, number of scholars engaged in this area of research is very less now in India. Now, lastly, here you can apply corpus data in information in linguistics. So starting from the applied linguistics to the words formation, alphabetical arrays, you can find out I have identified more than 25 different domains where we directly use corpus data. And today's lexicography, for instance, can never be possible without. I just mentioned that Oxford University Press now has taken up a new project for not only English to Indian language dictionaries, they're now developing Indian language English dictionaries, and for they need 1 lakh words for each of the Indian languages for developing Indian language to English dictionary. And that database, the usage, the meanings, everything are actually derived from the corpus. In fact, yesterday I had a long discussions with Oxford University Press. They are interested to share my entire corpus for these purposes. And they're also planning similar tasks for other Indian languages. Now, the last slide here, language corpora and fortune hunters. As you can find out, for me, here in the island, it's basically, what should I say, the treasure island. The corpus is basically a treasure island. There are multiple resources of all types, language, culture, history, heritage, all kinds of linguistic properties, and everything is there. And here you can find out that we are basically hunters, the fortune hunters, or rather pirates, going to that island and trying to gather data from language specialists, language appliers, NLP people, lexicographers, linguists of other domains, language teachers, students, many social scientists, and many other people. So everyone is actually interested to know, to utilize, to access this data. So thus, actually, the present time we can find out there is a very unique, fantastic, fantastic collaboration is going up, that corpus becoming an indispensable resource, not only for language technology or IT people, also all the people working in the area of linguistics, theoretical to applied, as well as people for many other domains. So, but in spite of that, we are not much aware about its importance. So many of the Indian languages have not yet started this project of developers. So this is the platform where I make a very personal or academic or intimate request to all the people. Please try to give some time to develop a good corpus of your language so that your contribution makes history, and try to develop the resources, knowledge of your language. Thus we can help our society as a language and our people. Thank you very much. So I stop.